The Green Bay Packers are about to give Jordan Love $50 million a year based on, 8 games, 10 games? Don't worry about it. I'll tell you why.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook, subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. You're worried about small sample size with Jordan Love. And I understand why. Half the season was all it was. And then there was that 5-game stretch that preceded that half the season that was pretty bad. Now, let's not forget what happened the first 3 games of the season. And let's not forget what happened in the postseason before the final 3 drives in the playoffs. If you go back, and I did this, and you look, and you find quarterbacks who have played at the level he played at. Because here's what I was trying to figure out. Were there players that showed the level of play that Jordan Love displayed in the second half, who just did it for that miracle run and that was it? And the answer is, almost in league history, no. There are 2 exceptions. We'll get to them. But when you look at the list of players who have ever had a stretch of 8 games, 8 consecutive games with 18 touchdowns and 1 interception, that was how Love finished the season with 8 in the regular season. 8 games, had 18 touchdowns and just 1 interception. The list of players who have done that: Jordan Love, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Cam Newton when he was the MVP in 2015 and they went to the Super Bowl when they went 15-1. Russell Wilson, Jalen Hurts, Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, Kirk Cousins, Matt Castle. And then Nick Foles did it in 8 games, but it was 6 starts. So he was not really in the sample that I was trying to capture. He went on 2 charmed runs in his NFL career where he just was on a lights out heater. But this list gives you a really good indication that in order to play at this level, you essentially have to be a franchise quarterback. Nick Foles, he did it in a Philadelphia run where Chip Kelly okey-doked the whole league. And then Nick Foles, by the way, did it again, not in this to this degree, but had that magical run. They won a Super Bowl with him. He was unbelievable in that stretch of games. Never reached that pinnacle again. So if you're going to be cynical, you say Nick Foles. Or you say Matt Castle. Now, Matt Castle in Kansas City, when he did it with Jamal Charles as an All-Pro that season, Dwayne Bowe as an All-Pro that season, and 2 offensive linemen who made the Pro Bowl. Brian Waters, who's one of the best guards of his generation, and Brandon Albert. There were 6 All-Pros, or 6 Pro Bowl players on that team, 2 All-Pros, 2 of them on offense. It's not a comparable situation to what Jordan Love had. And by the way, Matt Castle was in year 7. That's the other part of this. If you look at the players who had this stretch of games in their first year as a starter, there are 3 names on the list. Lamar Jackson, when he was the MVP. Patrick Mahomes, when he was the MVP, and Jordan Love. That's it. That's it. That tells you that the guys who were able to sustain it, you can say small sample size all you want, but the reason small sample sizes are scary is because in a small sample size, you can play above your head, right? In the NBA, you can shoot 10 games, you can shoot 50% from three. You're not a 50% three-point shooter, but in 10 games, you can do that because it's a small sample size. But what these numbers tell us, what history is telling us, is that's not true in this case, that his play was so superlative. It almost is, it's not impossible, but it is historically unlikely that he is anything less than a franchise quarterback. Nick Foles was much further into his career, and he was not even the preferred starter when this was happening. He was filling in for Michael Vick. So if we take just the preferred starter guys, he's not on the list. And it was 2 games where he was in fill-in duty. You can pad the touchdowns. You can pad the no interceptions in those games. So there's a reason why we wanted to make 8 games. And that was the run to end the regular season. The other part of this, in the playoffs, Jordan Love against the Dallas Cowboys was 1 incompletion away from a perfect passer rating, a 157.2 passer rating. There have only been 3 guys in playoff history, 25 or younger, to have a 150 or higher passer rating in a playoff game. Josh Allen, Jordan Love, and CJ Stroud. 2 games that happened last year. We're talking about all-time playoff performances. And if you look at, let's just like widen the scope a little, 150, like nearly perfect. So let's go 130. 7 playoff games since the merger where the QB posting a passer rating over 130 at 25 or younger. Josh Allen's done it twice. It's Patrick Mahomes. It's Dan Marino. It's CJ Stroud. It's Jordan Love. And it's Brock Purdy last year, 2 playoffs ago. And that Brock Purdy game, as has been the case for a lot of Brock Purdy games, was so fake. 2 of the touchdowns were checkdowns to receivers who were wide open and walked in untouched. And his 3rd touchdown passing was a 75-yard Deebo Samuel catch and run on like a 12-yard throw to a wide open Deebo. And he just does the rest. Like the comparisons to the CJ Stroud and the Josh Allen performances and the Jordan Love performances, it's not close. It's not close. So in rare company in his playoff debut, in rare company in any 8-game stretch, in any quarterback's career, there's not some like random 8-game sample from Brad Johnson, and there's not some random 8-game sample from Chris Chandler, and there's not some random Dante Culpepper 8-game stretch, or random like Gus Frerotte 8-game stretch. No. 8 games, half a season, clearly. History is telling us that's a big enough sample size to say it's not just a fluke. Now, whether he ends up being Kirk Cousins or one of the other names on this list, we'll see. We'll see. And so I understand the trepidation from people who say small sample size. I am certainly someone that is going to point out and say small sample size. But when you're worried about small sample size, it's because you think there will be outliers in your sample. And what this is telling us is that 8 games is actually 8 consecutive games. And his play was such to the level that 8 games at that level is just not something that happens on a fluke. Now, what does that mean for this team? I want to talk about their path to being better. We'll do that next on Locked On Packers. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed or power or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I was listening to a show the other day, a podcast. It was Robert Mays and Bill Barnwell over on the the Athletic Football Show. And they were talking about lingering questions in the NFC North. And as they went through the discussion, I realized something. And I caused a stir on Friday maybe it was Thursday, when I tweeted some of these things out. And the heart of what I was saying is that the issues that the Packers had heading into the offseason, safety, linebacker, we said corner, offensive line, if that's really a question mark for you. They have paths on the roster to making those positions better. They went out and they added 2 top 100 pick linebackers. Whether or not those players are good, we don't know. They went out and they added Xavier McKinney, top of market free agency. They went out and they added Javon Bullard and Evan Williams and Keaton Oladapo. Whether or not those work out, we don't know. But they put themselves in a position to have answers to these questions. Depth at offensive line. Jacob Monk, who Randy Mueller, longtime Dolphins, Saints, Seahawks front office man, said he was the most undervalued interior offensive lineman in the draft. Jordan Morgan in the first round. You went on and you signed Andre Dillard. You have given yourself a pathway to fixing those things. And at corner, where they didn't add until the 7th round with Kalen King, who I will call Kevin King at least one more time, and I apologize in advance to Kalen. Whatever he is, and I like the talent, I thought that was an absolute steal in the 7th round. They told us all offseason that they liked their cornerback room better than we did. They went out and they added Kalen King. Okay. But they got buy-in from Jair Alexander, in part with the Jeff Hafley replacement with Joe Barry. They brought in Xavier McKinney. And Eric Stokes apparently physically looks like Eric Stokes. They believe in Carrington Valentine. They re-signed Corey Ballantyne. Well, between Carrington Valentine and Eric Stokes, you feel like, okay, you have a pathway to success there. That's not true in Detroit. It's just not. They needed a secondary pass rusher. They added DJ Reader. That's not a secondary pass rusher. Now, James Houston is coming back from injury, but he's been on this team, was on this team 2 years ago, had a wholly unsustainable sack to QB hit ratio, 11 QB hits and 8 sacks. That's crazy. Like, that's Kyler Fackrell stuff. They don't have, Ali McNeil is like a nice interior pass rusher. DJ Reader is a nice, they are not like, hey, you can, if you're going to double team Aiden Hutchinson, you got to worry about these other guys. That's not the situation. Now, they did go out and they added a corner. We'll see, right? Same thing as the Packers at safety and linebacker. We'll see. But they also didn't add a secondary pass catcher. They've got Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's awesome. They've got Sam Laporta, who's awesome. They have Jameson Williams, who had 24 catches last year. And you can say, whatever you want about the suspension. He played 11 games, 24 catches. 11 games in the regular season. 2 catches a game. It's a little less if you include the playoffs. I mean, I got it. I went on multiple Lions shows last week talking about this. And I was like, there were 4 Packers receivers, including 2 rookies last year, who outproduced Jameson Williams, who the Lions traded up in the first round to go get. Bo Melton, if he'd have played 11 games, would have outproduced Jameson Williams. That's not a solution. Now, you can say Jameson Williams, similar situation to Eric Stokes, except we've seen Eric Stokes be good. Eric Stokes was good as a rookie, not good for a rookie, good as a rookie. So it's a different level of confidence that you have in that being a solution. That is something you can, it's more akin to James Houston, if you want to make that argument, except Eric Stokes doesn't have the underlying uncertainty of those numbers holding up. Unlikely if you're only going to get 11 QB hits to get 8 sacks. If you're going to 11 QB hits, probably get 5 sacks, which is a nice rotational pass rusher. That's like Kingsley Enagbare or a rookie Lucas Van Ness. The pathway to fixing these things for the Packers, they're on their roster. You can see the vision. And it is clear now, and should be clear, that when the Packers have a problem, Brian Gutekunst is going to throw draft resources at it. 3 safety picks, 2 linebacker picks. You go back to last year, multiple tight ends, multiple receivers when they need it. You go back to his first draft, multiple corners, 3 receivers on day 3. This is a pattern of behavior for Brian Gutekunst. Multiple drafts with multiple offensive linemen. David Bakhtiari exits. You spend a first-round pick on Jordan Morgan. You double dip at offensive line with Jacob Monk. So drafting for need can be fraught. That's true. But you gave yourself the chance. Did I love the value that the Packers got from their draft in terms of positional value? In a vacuum, no. And the 3rd round pick, I'm going to need some convincing on that one. Loved Edgerrin Cooper. Liked Jordan Morgan. Really liked what they did on day 3. I mean, day 3 is pretty unassailable. To get Michael Pratt and Kalen King where they did is pretty unassailable. And I think Kalen King, you can make the case that's your long-term something project. Carrington Valentine played good enough last year to give you a hint, and in significant time, that he can be a starter. Eric Stokes, we know when he's healthy, can be a starter. Kalen King, we'll see. Can he play outside? Can he play inside? We talked to Jim Nagy last week. He likes Kalen King a lot. Thought a lot of it was a confidence issue with him. Can the Packers restore that confidence? If they can, they give themselves a chance at a player. And so this is what brought me to my ultimate conclusion that the Packers just have a better roster than the Lions because they don't have these holes. I think your roster is, in a lot of ways, like the offensive line or like your secondary, a weakling system. I think it is. I think the Packers proved last year, or at least demonstrated proof of concept. Whether it was proof, I don't know. But they showed last year you do not need that many blue chip talent players. You don't need that many all pros. Now, Jordan Love in the second half of the year played like one. Rashawn Gary in the first part of the year played like one. We know Jair Alexander is capable of playing like one. We know Elton Jenkins is capable of playing like one. I think there's a good chance Zach Tom at some point in his future will be one. But last year, they didn't have the level of blue chip talent that the Lions did. Now, we didn't know Sam Laporta was going to play like that. We didn't know Amon-Ra St. Brown, could sustain that level of play. Aiden Hutchinson clearly is that dude. But they have also clear holes on that roster. And the only real difference between the Packers season and the Lions season last year was they played the 49ers, the Lions did, a week later. It's really the only difference. Both teams blew leads that they should not have blown. Both teams outplayed the 49ers. And I think both teams would have had a chance to beat the Chiefs. Now, the 49ers had a chance, like still came down to one drive. But if you look at, it's interesting, if you look at Pythagorean win expectation. So how would we expect your season to finish given how well you did beating up your opponents? So based on things like your point differential. The NFC North was incredibly bunched. The Lions were 10.16, the Packers 9.4, the Vikings 8.68, the Bears 7.79. So an 8-win team, a rounded up to 9-win team, a rounded down to 9-win team, and a 10-win team. This is going to be a highly competitive division next year. And the Packers, I think, are in the best position to weather that storm. Now, one place where they're going to have a battle on their hands is running back. And I think there is a recent example that we might be able to look at to see if that is something that will repeat itself this season. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. NBA, it's getting tight. It's getting tight in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. The Pacers roaring back. Like, I don't know about that Pacers team. I don't feel like they're that good. They got really lucky with injuries against the Bucks and the Knicks, but they keep winning, and they're going to give themselves a chance because they can flat out score the rock. I don't know. Go check out FanDuel, because if you know, or you think you know, put your money where your mouth is. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. The Packers seem really, really excited about Marshawn Lloyd. Adam Stenavich could not contain himself talking about Marshawn Lloyd. If you go back and you look, the last time the Packers had a three-headed monster at running back like this, they're paying Josh Jacobs, they brought back A.J. Dillon, they used a top 100 pick on Marshawn Lloyd. In 2020, they had Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and A.J. Dillon. Aaron Jones had 201 carries, Jamal Williams had 119 carries, and A.J. Dillon had 46 carries, the lion's share of which came in one game. Now that he was also a big part of what they did in the postseason, I don't think it's going to look like that. I don't. I think the Packers, and you heard from Jim Nagy, he thought Marshawn Lloyd. Did I say Marshawn Lynch the first time? I hope not. Marshawn Lloyd. I hope I did. He thought Marshawn Lloyd was the best running back in the draft. Daniel Jeremiah thought Marshawn Lloyd was the best running back in the draft. If the Packers are this excited to get Lloyd involved, Josh Jacobs is going to be the primary back. But you want to save his legs. He's getting up there in age. He's been heavily used. You have these two other guys. You're paying A.J. Dillon. Now the question is, okay, if you're going to use Lloyd more, and I think early on we're talking about it's somewhat similar to like Christian Watson, scheme touches. Can you use him in 21 personnel in interesting ways? How much can he absorb in the passing game? Can you split him out? Can you have him play in the backfield with another running back? Can you jet motion, packaged plays? I think all that stuff is going to be something that we should expect to see with Marshawn Lloyd. How flexible can he be? And then how flexible can A.J. Dillon be? Because Matt LaFleur earlier in the spring made an interesting comment about A.J. Dillon and the way that he might be used, that there may be some different usages for him. And we saw last year, they had a pin pull run, I believe, where A.J. Dillon, I can't remember exactly the concept, but essentially it became a toss play where A.J. Dillon was a lead blocker, where he was in the backfield with Aaron Jones. Now, he didn't exactly lay people out, but he certainly has the body type for that. And in pass protection, he is willing to stick his face in there. Like, it's not, I understand he has a reputation among some Packer fans of not playing to his size. And I think that is a fair criticism, but his size is like outlier stuff. At 6 foot, 250, like there just aren't that many guys in the NFL that look like him. So he'd have to be like the most physical guy in the NFL, basically. And he's not. But he shows enough in pass protection where I feel like if you gave him some more blocking responsibilities, he could handle it. And then there are also times when it's like, okay, if what he's really going to do is chip and release, he doesn't have to just be a running back. There was the Josiah DeGuara. Now, if he's going to play that H-back, fullback kind of hybrid role in some packages, he's going to have to lead block. But then, like, if he's going to be that motion fullback or he's going to be that H-back sniffer type, he may not have to do that much at the point of attack on passing downs, for example. He's not going to have to, like, go run sail routes. It's just going to be little sit routes and flat routes and arrow routes. Like, it's not going to be anything that complex. They didn't ask Josiah DeGuara to do any of that. He's shown he can do that as a running back. So if he can give you a little bit of not just personnel flexibility, but placement flexibility, positional flexibility, where he can play a little bit of here, a little bit over there, that makes it easier to get multiple of these guys on the field at once. The only problem with that is, in order to do that, you have to do one of three things. You have to get in 21. Well, it is sort of all encompassing. So in order to be in 21, you can only have two receivers. Okay? So now you're taking at least two other really good players off the field to play A.J. Dillon out of position. Or you're taking one of your tight ends off the field. One of your really good young players who's probably better than A.J. Dillon. So you can play A.J. Dillon out of position. I don't know if that's the best allocation of your resources. Now, could you, if you wanted to get crazy, play two tight ends, two running backs and three receivers? Theoretically, no tight end. If A.J. Dillon is going to be, kind of H-back, then you could theoretically do that. Are they going to? We've seen no evidence to suggest that they would do that. So I'm pretty skeptical that they would do that. Maybe they would. So this is where the rubber meets the road on this. This is why it's problematic. Because they have all these receivers they want to get on the field. They have at least two really good tight ends they want to get on the field. I just don't see how that can be that big a part of their offense. Now, Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd on the field at the same time, I think we'll see that. Because then you're saying, okay, the team's best running back and a guy that we think is one of the best playmakers or potentially one of the best playmakers on the field at the same time. That part of it makes sense. But such that it's a problem, this is a champagne problem, a good one to have. How are you going to get all your good players on the field at once? And if you have depth, you have an injury, you still got another guy in, or you can play this other kind of way, this other style. So that gives the Packers a ton of flexibility. And this goes back to the point that we were just making, that it's better to have a complete roster than a roster that has got more stars at the top. And I think the Packers, you can make the case, have one of the most complete rosters I think it's a compelling case, one of the most complete rosters in the NFL. And I think they're going to prove that this season. Back tomorrow, America's guest, Jason Hirschhorn, to talk about some really interesting guys on the end of the roster who have a chance to make an impact this season. It is our undrafted free agent prospectus. We do it every year. We have a great time doing it. And that'll be tomorrow. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Wherever you find social medias, Locked On Packers. Go subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts, Locked On Packers, so you can stay Locked On Packers.